This recap on episode 6 of my Castles and Crusades campaign. In this session, I had 2 players at the session, and their characters were tasked to join the Wolves of Arden, who were the personal guard of the chieftain Conall Mormac, the ruler of Arden, to go and hunt out some goblins. They brought back in previous sessions word that there was goblin movement in the woods near outside of town, so the chieftain has sent them to deal with that. I had two, like I said, I had 2 players. One was introducing a new character named Tarranis, who's a cleric of the blood red god Caduceus, and the other one was Rhonin, who's been in several other sessions, young human fighter. So they head out. With them is the NPC Tula Shorewillow, who's a gnome from Hilldale, who was played by one of my other characters in another session. So they head out with Tula showing them the patrol where they had encountered goblins on her and Two Clan Sam, who's one of my other players' characters, had traveled when they had traveled from Hilldale to Arden, where they had encountered goblins, and she does that. Along their travels, they find a group of goblins that are gathering like herbs and roots and fungus, and they don't know why, other than the only one in the party that speaks goblin is the gnome Tula, and she conveys to the patrol leader, a man named Regan, that they're collecting stuff for someone named Girk. And so they ambush this patrol, and they make pretty quick work of it. We did that Theater of the Mind. It was a pretty quick encounter. And it was some good role play in it too, because for like Tarranis, he's been assigned to this patrol, which is tradition in Arden for a cleric to be assigned to patrols. But this was his character's first patrol, his first combat, and he showed himself well in that combat. So they beat those goblins pretty easily, and then they keep following the trail that they had found until they find a much bigger encampment. And one of the things that kind of Tula brings to light is that she also overheard the goblins talking about Girk making some sort of nasty brew for the tall ones, which they assume to mean them, the people of Arden. They find this encampment, which is the map here. This is a combination of home-built terrain and some 3D printed stuff and WizKid stuff, a good combination of stuff. So there's a sizable amount of goblins in this encampment, and they know that they can't just fight them straight on. So Regan, the patrol leader and shield man for the chieftain of Arden, suggests that him and the rest of the wolves there's 5 other wolves with them. The wolves are actually people, not wolves. That's just their name, the Wolves of Arden. And he's going to cause a distraction with 4 other of the wolves, while one of the wolves joins the PCs and Tula and get into that big tent and find out what's going on. So that's their plan. So they circle around to the what would be the right side of the map, and they come in from the side over here. There's some of their NPC, the miniatures we use. So they sneak in, and they find this tent in the middle. The most prominent feature in the tent in the middle is a very big boiling cauldron. And on their way in, they try to be sneaky about it, and one of the characters, I think it was Rhonin, really bumbled his stealth roll, and they find out later on that he actually alerted the goblins that were inside the tent, who hid and waited for them to come in, and they cut a hole in the side of the tent and they come in. So we have Rhonin, Caduceus, Tarranis, Tula, and a man named Alfric, which is one of the wolves of Arden. They make their way in, and they're confronted by Girk, who's a shriveled up old goblin woman, female goblin, and she confronts them and and you know, kind of asked them if they've basically it's like, oh, more for the stew or whatever, and she ends up casting spells on them. The first spell I think the first spell she cast, she actually charmed Alfric, and through another check, was able to order him to attack the party and protect her. So he actually attacks Tula very well, almost kills Tula, and 3 other goblins come out from hiding. So the party's in a very tight, enclosed battle. Oops, pardon the tippy camera. So they go in this tent here, and they're in this fight in here. There's 3 goblins, those guys, and Gurk, which I don't know what I did with her, but oh, there she is right there. Gert, Steamforge Games Epic Encounter Mini. So they get in a fight there, and it's actually pretty close, pretty tight. Like, it doesn't really look like things are going to go their way, and the guys were joking about TPK because the rolls, the dice, there's nothing on their fault. The dice were not with them. They had a hard time winning initiative and making hits. And goblins in Castles and Crusades are actually kind of tough to hit. They're not real tough, but they're tough to hit. So they eventually, that was changed, I think, because Rhonin rolled a critical hit, and that kind of turned the tide of the battle, and they started picking up hits. Gert was casting a lot of spells. She hit Caduceus with, Tarranis with a Ray of Enfeeblement, which dropped his stats down and his attack and damage, which didn't help the fight, their side of the fight. She hit Tula with a pain spell, which just racked her with pain, and she started moving around, trying to get away from Tarranis, Alfric, until he finally broke the charm that he was under when she ordered him to attack again, and he was able to break it, which really turned the battle because it wasn't looking that good. The 3 goblins were slain, and when that happened, Gurk realized that she was probably not going to win this encounter. The tides had shifted, so she fled, and she was able to get away with minimal damage. The party, she'd cast Firebolt a few times and missed, so the tent was in the middle of this battle was starting to go up in flames, and they helped that along. Rhonin had already preset a Molotov cocktail, so when they were getting ready to flee, he tossed that and burned that thing to the ground, and they fled into the Homewood, and eventually were reunited with the Regan and the rest of the wolves of Arden, and then they returned to the town of Arden. They learned a few things, like they learned that goblins can sometimes have magic, which was pretty neat. And one of my players actually told me afterwards that he really liked the spells that I picked for her because they just seemed kind of evil, and I think that was how he put it, and which was cool because that was the intent. So yeah, it was a good session. Like I said, I had 2 players, West Marches style game, which was nice. We were able to introduce Tarranis, which is a new character, which my player Dan had been wanting to bring in, and having another cleric in the party is never a bad thing. So yeah, real good session. And in the next session, they're going to travel further west from Arden, and they're trying to actually retake. Well, they're going to go to the mines, which were lost to the goblins about 25 years ago in the setting, and find out what's going on, and with the intent, I think, to try to reclaim the mine. So that will be started in the next session. So yeah, that's the session. Like I said, most of the terrain is stuff I made. Like this stuff here is just trees I bought off Amazon that I reflocked because the flock wasn't that great, but they were super cheap. You got a lot of them. And then the rock stuff is just MDF foam. Some of it's plaster cast mixed in with stuff with cast rocks and foam. And Paizo Goblin Village, those small tents and the bonfires and the pickets. And that tent is a 3D printed model that I have to finish painting at some point. But yeah, thanks for watching.